Welcome to Discourse Politics, everybody. It's the year of our Lord 2020. And as if 2020 couldn't get any worse, we have what is considered a nightmare scenario. For those of you who didn't live through the 2000 election, believe me, I was there. I was young, but I was there. And I remember how terrible it was, just basically because there's a lot of tension on both sides. And the country was not as divided back then as it is now. And I don't think there's any scenario where anybody is going to be happy in this election. Because at this point, it seems like regardless of what happened, everybody feels like whoever the winner is going to be illegitimate. And I don't think there's any way around that. My hope was that whoever won this election was going to win it unquestionably. And now that is out the window. Not a chance. So what we are going to do is we're going to quickly go over my favorite part, which is that the pollsters were completely wrong. Then we're going to circle back to this. We're going to talk about some shenanigans. Then we're going to talk about sort of the way forward and what I think is going to happen between now and January. So let's get into it. So first things first, we are going to look at the difference between 538's average and reality. So remember, my thesis was that in the 2016 election, that pollsters got 2016 wrong because they had a non-response bias and a social desirability bias against Donald Trump, in which Donald Trump supporters did not answer surveys. And if they did answer surveys, they didn't answer them as truthfully as pollsters would have liked them to. What I had said on this channel was that that problem has only gotten worse, not better. So of the 6 swing states that we've been talking about, in 2016 specifically, in the swing states, these 6 swing states had an error of 2.8%, a final error of 2.8%. Overall, in all the swing states in 2016, there was an average error of 5.1%. But in these specific 6 swing states, the average error was 2.8% in 2016. 538, on average, got it wrong by 5.5%. As of now. There's still vote coming in Pennsylvania, still vote coming in Arizona, but by and large, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 200% increase. In other words, their error doubled from 2016 to 2020, which I predicted it was going to be at least a 50% increase. So in the end, it was about a 100% increase. They doubled their error from 2016 to 2020. And I mean, just look at these projections. The popular vote was supposed to go to Biden by 8.4%. We're sitting here now with Biden plus 2.3%. Biden was supposed to win Arizona by 2.6. He's ahead by 3.4%, but the vote is still out, and we'll get to that in a second. Florida Biden was supposed to win by 2.5. It ended up going to Trump by 3.4. Biden was supposed to win Michigan by 7.9%. It went Biden 1.2% so far. North Carolina was supposed to be Biden 1.8%. It went Trump 1.4% as we speak. There's still some vote coming in for some reason. Pennsylvania, 4.7% was supposed to go to Biden by 4.7% according to 538. It went to Trump. It is currently at Trump 4%. I think it will trend towards Biden. Don't know what the final result's going to be, but it's not necessarily looking good for Trump. That lead just keeps shrinking and shrinking. Wisconsin, supposed to go Biden plus 8.4%. In fact, 538's poll, Biden up by 17%. It's supposed to be 17%. And that's considered an A-plus poll by Nate Silver. Anyway, the average was 8.4%. Right now, it's Biden by 0.6%. One of the biggest problems that I have with polling and the industry as a whole is that, one, this election was a lot closer than the pollsters wanted to admit. And number 2, it creates a money problem and potentially an enthusiasm problem. So a lot of people claim that it's voter suppression by how far off these polls are. And I think you can make that claim. Donald Trump won in 2016, even though there was there was a lot of push by pollsters to say Hillary Clinton had it in the bag. But this was twice as worse as that. This was so much more worse than that. I mean, you're looking at a blowout, an 8.4% Joe Biden lead that manifests itself on election day as about 2%. I mean, some people had him up at 54%. 54%. And I believe he's hovering right now at about 50%. It's one of those things where the campaign dries up and runs out of money at the end of the day. I'll explain it like this. They say one of the hardest things to do as a human being is to climb Mount Everest. It is one of the most physically hardest things to do is to climb Mount Everest. I think the second hardest thing to do as a human being is to work on a campaign that is 6, 7, or 8 points behind 3 weeks or 4 weeks before an election and calling donors to get money. Because here's the thing, your call list, it starts with donors that didn't max out their max donation. Let's say they're $1,000 from their max donation. That ideally is the person you'd want to call because they've given large sums before. But I can assure you, if you're 7 points behind 3 or 4 weeks before an election and you give that person a call, not only are they probably not going to donate to you, but they're probably going to dig into you for wasting their money because you're 7 points behind 3 weeks before an election's out. It's not just a voter suppression issue. Bad polling and skewed polling and bad data, biased data, really, really, really hurts the campaigns that they're skewed against. And that is the biggest issue in 2020. And so never again, I swear to you, never again should we ever take these hits seriously. And I mean that. I legitimately mean that. 538, Nate Silver, and that arrogant, sanctimonious piece of crap. All these pollsters and all the media that was behind these pollsters are legitimately useless. They are utterly useless and should never be taken seriously again. Here's the funny thing. A dude with 3 spreadsheets had less error than they did in 2016 by using common sense and basic math. Common sense and basic math, my error was 2.5% as it sits right now. Nate Silver has a staff of 44 people, I believe. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And their error was 5.5%, twice as bad as it was in 2016. If a dude with 3 spreadsheets can beat the whole entire polling industry, you guys suck at your job. I don't know how to put it other than that. A dude with 3 spreadsheets beat you guys by better than half. My error, it might be a lot less than theirs, but at the end of the day, technically they were on the right side of where the election ended up. But it just goes to show you how utterly bad these pollsters are. Absolutely terrible. And when I do a deeper dive into the polling and how they got it wrong in 2020, because I will be doing a video on that, I made errors too. But look, my errors are close to the margin of error. And as Arizona comes in, as that 500,000 votes comes in, I'll be actually pretty close. I think this one will also be within the margin of error. So almost all of my projections, with the exception of Wisconsin, are going to be within the margin of error. Theirs, not so much. Only Arizona currently, and if Trump ends up winning Arizona by more than 0.4%, then Nate Silver will not be within the margin of error of any state. Utterly ridiculous. Multi-million-dollar enterprise. Absolutely ridiculous polling. Let's briefly talk about the shenanigans. So right now, there's still 13% of the vote out. Donald Trump's only leading by 3.3% with 13% of the vote out. I believe that by tomorrow, they're going to call Pennsylvania for Joe Biden. Now, we'll get into what I think is going to happen between now and in January. But I want to talk quickly about shenanigans. And here's what I don't understand. After Donald Trump trounced Joe Biden in Florida, Georgia seemed like it was, an easy victory for Trump. And then there was some sort of error, and all of a sudden, the needle went from 85% Trump was going to win Georgia to 65% that Joe Biden was going to win it. And it really pretty much didn't move after that. And then in some strange move, they stopped counting votes in Georgia, in the Democratic parts of Georgia. And this is about 10 or 11 p.m. last night, my time. They stopped counting votes in Milwaukee. They stopped counting votes in Detroit. They stopped counting votes in Philadelphia. And All this sort of happened simultaneously. And while that was going on, you had Arizona that was going to start counting its votes, Nevada that started to count its votes and Trump got within 8,000 votes, and then they stopped counting their votes. So it just seems really strange that, given all this time, all these places, these Democratic strongholds, stopped counting their votes. In the meantime, the places where the Republican votes were coming in, those votes were just trickling in and trickling in and coming in and coming in and coming in. And then magically, about the time that all the Republican votes were in, about 2 a.m, then it seemed like they started to count Milwaukee. They started to count Detroit. Some of the ballots in Pennsylvania, they told the poll workers to go home, and then they were going to lay out the ballots to make them easier to count, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's a weird way to put it. I'm sure there's a legitimate thing that they did, but it just sounds weird. Like, oh, go home, no need to count. We're going to open up a lot of these absentee ballots and lay them out so they're easier to count. Understandable because they are in envelopes, but somewhat strange, a little fishy. We're sort of in the situation now where, they keep finding votes in Georgia. They haven't really found any votes in North Carolina, but I think they're waiting on some mail-in votes that may or may not come in the mail. What Arizona did is they counted their ballots first in as first to be counted, which means that all the absentee ballots, all the mail-in ballots are counted first, and then they're now to the in-person voting. If they really do have 500, or some people have said 600,000 votes they have to count left, if they really truly have those votes and they are election day votes, those are most likely going to break 2-1 for Donald Trump. Mathematically, he only needs 57% to overcome this 90,000 vote lead. So if he gets more than 57% of the on-day vote, which he's supposed to get about 65%, then he should be able to overcome that, and Arizona can go for him. So where does all of this leave us? What's going to happen between now and January? Well, in order to do that, we need to come up with a map and sort of go over this map. Here's what I think is going to happen over the next 24 to 48 hours. I think this vote's going to come in, and magically, just like Michigan and Wisconsin, that what's going to happen is it's going to go to Joe Biden. When that happens, I think depending on what happens here will determine what happens everywhere else. And here's what I mean. If these votes are counted and it goes something like this, especially if it goes like this, where Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada are somehow flipped, I'm sure Donald Trump is going to challenge it legally. I don't think he's going to prevail. What is the scenario that I'm dreading, but I am 70% sure is going to happen? This is just my guess, but between now and December, this is what I think is going to happen. I think Pennsylvania is going to be called for Joe Biden. I think North Carolina and Georgia are going to be called for Donald Trump. I think Alaska is going to be called for Donald Trump. I really honestly believe that Arizona, he's going to pull out an upset there, or Nevada. I think one of those two. I don't understand why Nevada stopped counting their votes. There's only there's not that many people there, and they're not doing anything because Las Vegas is shut down. So, I mean, you probably could have grabbed enough pole dancers to be poll watchers, and you could have already counted the vote by now. That's how small the state is, and that's how many people are just sitting around. Not your fault. Las Vegas is shut down. I'm not denigrating poll dancers, nor am I denigrating the city of Las Vegas. I'm just trying to make a joke about the fact that you could have had that state counted a long time ago. It's not that big of a state. I don't know what's taken so long. Just post your results. If it goes something like this, or even if it goes something like this, what's going to happen is Pennsylvania is going to be challenged in court, one way or another. And if I understand it correctly, here is what the issue is. Pennsylvania was told to keep their ballots separate from the ones that arrived on Election Day by 7 p.m. and the ones that arrived today or after 7 p.m. It is my understanding that they're not doing that. They're not separating them. And like I said, this is just my understanding. I could be wrong. What I think the legal challenge is going to be is twofold. If they really did mix those ballots together, it might invalidate the ballots completely, or they're going to claim that. It doesn't invalidate the ballots. They're going to claim that invalidates the ballots, is what the Trump administration is going to claim. The second thing is, I think broadly speaking, they're going to make the claim is that the Constitution has an election day, and they're going to make a Byzantine type argument. And this is just, I don't necessarily like this argument, but I think this is what's going to happen. They're going to make a Byzantine argument that because there is an election day and that's what's enumerated in the Constitution, that is what you get. You get the day. And any votes that didn't come in once the polling locations have closed are invalid. And if they truly did mix those ballots up, then those ballots, any of the ones that are mixed in there, are invalidated. I think that's going to be their claim, and that's going to be their case. Now, if they win, then Donald Trump is, going to be named president, and it's going to be a contentious victory if he wins. If he loses, then there's enough shenanigans that happened all around the country. I mean, it really does call into question the efficacy. I'm not going to say legitimacy, but the efficacy of mail-in ballots. And I think we need to have some sort of national standards on this stuff. And here's what I mean. How is it that we could get Florida in a timely manner? We pretty much knew by like 10 p.m. my time that Florida was 100% in Trump's column. How is it that Florida can accomplish that, but Georgia couldn't, North Carolina really couldn't, Pennsylvania definitely couldn't, Michigan, Wisconsin couldn't, and we have Arizona and Nevada for God knows what reason hasn't reported their numbers yet. Like, how do we get in the situation where a state as big as Florida, with the millions of votes they had, a lot of them cast absentee, a lot. I mean, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 million cast absentee or mail-in ballot. They got it done, and these states didn't. And I think the most obvious reason is I believe Florida could count the votes early. So they already had them counted. It was all too easy because they could count the votes earlier. But still, we need to figure out why. Like, why is it that these states are, we're still counting ballots, and just the shenanigans alone of highly Democrat counties that magically stop counting ballots all around the same time, all across the country. All the Republican ballots pretty much come in, and then they resume. And the ballots are coming in almost the perfect proportion to just barely overtake your opposition. It seems fishy. Now, the problem with that is one, I'm not going to spout off conspiracy theories. I'm not that type. And here's the problem. What I just said, it looks fishy, but in reality, if it was legitimate, it would look just as fishy regardless of how it came in. The breakdown of votes, if it's 100% legitimate, let's just assume it is, the breakdown of votes would have come in the same way, meaning it would look like they were tampered with, but that would not necessarily be the case because Wisconsin is going to go, 3 out of 4 votes is going to go towards Joe Biden or close to it, 70-30. And so, yes, it looks like it's magic, but in reality, it's just they were slow to count votes, which again, that should never have happened. You should be able to count votes. You really should be able to count votes. So what really is going to happen between now and January? And I don't even think this would stop it from happening. But even if the map ended up looking like this, I still think it's going to end up in court. I just think that that's how it's going to go. But I think the reality of the situation is it's going to end up looking something like this with maybe that or that. It could look like that with this going to court over Pennsylvania or any of them for that matter. And, and there might be some shenanigans that are uncovered via court cases. If there are some discrepancies like vote totals where voter rolls say you had 70,000 votes, but you produced 92,000, and that happens in a few counties, that could be grounds for, something strange. But my point is that, if this is how the map looks, this is going to end up in the Supreme Court, unfortunately. If, this is how the map looks, it's going to end up in the Supreme Court over Pennsylvania. The last best hope that none of this is going to end up in the Supreme Court, or if it does end up in the Supreme Court, it's going to be an easy decision, is if Donald Trump just wins Pennsylvania outright, that the votes they count don't overcome his lead. If he wins Pennsylvania, he wins North Carolina, wins Georgia, and either wins Nevada or Arizona. And we can all breathe a sigh of relief because, yes, I do think the Democrats could, push a court case, but they're up against a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. And it's Donald Trump who's the one that's been pushing for illegitimacy and pushing for courts. It would be much, much harder, I think, for the Biden campaign to make that same case, just basically because, unfortunately, it's been Donald Trump who's the one that's been sowing doubts. Now, does that mean that they can't sue for whatever? It doesn't mean that, but it does mean that if Donald Trump loses Pennsylvania, this is going to the Supreme Court, most likely. I'm fairly certain that future generations and interstellar beings are going to look at this as, a great ending to a great year. I'm definitely going to, do an update I'll probably do another update tomorrow after more votes are counted. For all I know, before I even get this video out, they will have called Pennsylvania for somebody. I think at this point, the only pathway that doesn't end up in a long legal battle is if Donald Trump actually does sweep in some way or another and just ends up getting over 270. Democrats are not going to like it, but I think that the legal case would not materialize the same way that something like this would. This would definitely materialize as a court case that's going to the Supreme Court. But anyway, so my next video, I'll probably be covering this. I'm definitely going to do another deep dive into why polls are wrong. I plan on doing a deep dive into Section 230, a deep dive into media bias. I believe that the media bias in this whole election is something that needs to be reviewed. It was an interesting election, and I wished I had predicted it better. But the prediction is what it is. I am at least happy that I was closer than the pollsters. I really did think that Trump was going to sweep. It looked like it on paper. Make sure you like and subscribe for more political and social commentary, and I will see you next video.